I have the pleasure to be here today with Dr. Jules Hoffmann. Apparently, the first time that you went to the United States to give a lecture was in Washington in 1976. Such a great pleasure to have you back to participate in the International Congress of Entomology.
Thank you very much. I still distinctly remember that meeting. I had been invited at the time by Professor Lawrence Gilbert, who was still in Chicago, and it was an event for me, unbelievable. There were hundreds of people there. They all spoke American, and I was still very timid in using my American English, or as they say now, global English. And so at that time, yes, we started some of work which I'm presenting here, but we also still were working quite a bit on insect hormones, and the predominant groups at that meeting were people working on neurohormones in insects and steroid hormones and juvenile hormone, of course, which was a big story in the United States. Some very big persons in the field in the United States at the time, which probably some of you remember, like Carol Williams, like Howard Schneiderman, Lynn Redford, and Jim Truman, and a series of people whom I remember very dearly.
So your first paper was an entomology paper when you were still 17 years old.
Yes.
Can you explain how that happened?
Yes, let me first explain that I could publish that at the age of 17 because my father was looking over my shoulder, and he was a real zoologist and entomologist. So yes, what he was also, he loved nature, and we went often for walks and hikes, and I got excited I saw that he could distinguish one grasshopper from the next by just listening to the songs, and that really excited me. And then I got into that, and then as things go, you realize that everywhere you have nearly the same species, and all of a sudden somewhere there's a song which you don't recognize, and you have to catch the animal. So I started loving nature, and then I started also, through his advice, seeing that you could nearly predict which species you would see there according to the plants which were growing there, and the soil and so on. And so it's a whole story which was developing relationship between the environment and the species. And so I first started on working on grasshoppers, and then what I'm not going to tell you, I also worked on planarians and platamines in the ponds, and then I turned to Heteroptera. That was a compromise between water and soil, and so we regularly published those. At that time, it still is the so-called Institute of the Grand Duke for Natural Sciences, and so every year in the autumn we would publish our observations and make drawings and so on. It was a very nice period.
Science has been very good to you. Gave the Nobel Prize and gave you also a wife. Your wife was on the same field, right?
Okay, that's a very nice. I'll tell her that you equate the two. That's very nice. No, I mean, of course, my wife was more important. So yes, I mean, she was actually, that was just by luck. My supervisor had hired a technician, and she was a beautiful young lady. And so at that time in France, you were allowed, you still are, you're allowed to propose outings and dinners to young ladies from your own lab. And so then we married, and she stopped doing her work, and then she took up studies again, and then finally she started a PhD, and my supervisor at that time thought of retiring, and so he asked me to take care of her work, and then we worked together and that has been extremely helpful for us, because she, at a given moment when she was about to defend it, it's a funny story, she was about to defend her thesis, and as I was in charge of the lab, I had to find a jury, and so I contacted people who might be known in the audience. It was Walter Gehring in Switzerland, there was Fotis Kafatos, he was at that time at Harvard still, and finally they said, but the person you should ask is Hans Bohrmann. And this I'm speaking about 78, 79, and I never had heard of Hans Bohrmann. His seminal paper had not yet appeared. Cecropians had not yet been published. So I said, okay, why not? And then I set They gave me the address. At that time, you had no email, and I was writing a letter to him, and he accepted to come under very severe conditions. My wife had to come first to give a seminar there, and then he would decide if the work was worth him being a member of a jury and so on. But it was a very good experience, and then we established contacts with that group in Sweden over many, many years until his retirement, and then the group sort of, that's a Swedish tradition, when a big boss retires, you just stop it, and then other things come into the place and so on. So the lab has not continued as such, which we often succeed in doing. So when I have succeeded Professor Joly, and now Jean-Luc Imler is my successor, but this lab still stays with the same evolving interests, of course, and techniques. It's not the same, but it's still some basic interests which we keep in the insect model.
Speaking of insect model, most of the people that start to work with the fruit flies, they do that because it's such a powerful model. But it seems that your path into the fruit flies had another explanation before you get into the issue of using as a model.
Yes.
Some allergy or something went on.
Well, I must say that no, I never thought initially of going into the genetics of Drosophila. I was not a geneticist. I was brought up as a zoologist, a classical zoologist, with, fortunately, thanks to the Luxembourgeois system where I grew up, a lot of chemistry. So it was between biology and chemistry, but no molecular biology. At that time, there was no molecular biology. There was genetics, but I was not in that field. So I was not one of the people trained by Michael Ashburn and so on. And but some of the people in the laboratory went through his laboratory, and our group went through his laboratory. So yes, I was really what excited me most was the relationship between insects and pathogens and fungi and bacteria. And then at a given moment, it turned out that we could not get further if we did not use genetics. And then our system allowed me to hire rapidly someone who was a trained geneticist, and so it was a young person who just had finished his PhD. I was on his PhD defense committee, and then he came, and some of the other people went to other groups, and then we introduced it. That's one of the advantages of this laboratory. You can survive, or let me say, you can continue as a laboratory and bring in other people and give them permanent positions. You see.
What advice would you give to the earlier career professionals, the students that are just initiating this field of entomology?
Well, you know, entomology is so diverse now. You have so many openings. One opening obviously is ecology now. And ecology has become very important, not only in France, but in the US, and so they are again leaders there. Then there's the opening to agriculture. There's an important opening now to health problems via the vector role of insects, and as we continue, we see now more and more problems with not only viruses and bacteria, but particularly with viruses. We see those problems coming up, and we mostly don't understand most of these. We still have no direct antiviral molecule in our hands. So, I mean, knowing the species, knowing the physiology of the insect, knowing its environment, knowing its interaction with the livestock, with humans, it's an enormous field. I mean, it's you cannot cover it just by yourself, but you can have a lab or an institute covering it. And then there's all the aspects of olfaction which touch all this. So I think it's fantastic. It's a fantastic field.
I think you get many questions from young scientists. How do I get the Nobel Prize? And I like your answer. So can you tell the people here what?
Well, my answer is very spontaneously. When they ask me what should I do to get a Nobel Prize, I say, number one, never think of it. I mean, you should not. The real good orientation in science, either you're applied scientist, which I respect. We need applied scientists, or you're a basic scientist, and then you should go there with through curiosity. So you should find a question which fascinates you, which interests you. Yes, you prepare to spend hours and hours and days and days and days on that question. So you have to feel the question itself, and try to do it in the beginning independently of what is going on in science in general, but always stay connected to the progress in technology. You see, our luck was we did a lot of mass spectrometry, but through collaborations always at the best level. The best level was not ours, but it was we just asked a question, but it was our colleagues who had the best equipment and so on. So mass spectrometry we did and so on. Of course, genetics, biochemistry we have, and molecular biology. We have to contact with the best groups. And then what is also always important is that young people, when they are entomologists, when they get into the field, they should somehow think of entomology as related to society. And it's not enough just to love grasshoppers. You should also, how does this relate, for instance, as we said in the beginning, to environment, to ecology, to agriculture, to food, to health of livestock and humans. And so ask your question, be excited about your question in a more general field, always the best technology, and always contact to very good people.
If you had to start over, would you do the same career path or would you do something differently?
You mean with my wife or with science?
With science.
Science. It's an important question. I don't have a ready answer. I don't know. I would have to think it over. If you give me a month, so I'll send you an email. I would certainly, the general strategy would be the same. I don't know if I would start again with insects or with mice. I don't know if I can, but probably in the context of it could be in the context of medicine. And
thank you very much. We really appreciate your time, and we are really look forward to your keynote lecture at the International Congress of Entomology. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation, and thank you very much for talking to us today.
You're absolutely welcome. It's my pleasure and my honor.